The great crystal palace of Xelara stood tall under two bright suns. Its walls shimmered like silver glass, and the air smelled of flowers that only grew on royal lands. Inside, servants moved quietly, afraid to make noise. Everyone in the palace knew one truth: the alien queen was angry again. Queen Xelara sat on her golden throne, her long purple hair glowing in the light. Her sharp eyes looked across the hall where her royal advisors stood, trembling. "Another one?" she asked coldly. "Yes, Your Majesty," an old servant bowed. "The 15th nanny has left. She refused to stay even one more night." The queen's jaw tightened. "What did my daughter do this time?" She threw her dinner at the wall, screamed for hours, and locked herself in her room. The queen rose to her feet. Her voice echoed through the throne hall. 15 nannies in 2 months. Is my daughter truly impossible to handle? No one dared to answer. They had seen how the little princess could scream so loudly that the palace lights flickered. Princess Xelara, the only child of the queen, was just 7 years old. She had large blue eyes that once shined like stars, but now they often looked angry or sad. Since her father, the late king, had died in battle, she had changed. She refused to learn royal lessons, refused to meet visitors, and refused to smile. Every day the queen brought in the best teachers, the kindest nannies, but one by one they failed. The queen turned to the tall windows that looked out over the city. From up here, she could see thousands of her people living in peace. She was loved and respected, known as the Iron Queen. But inside her heart she felt powerless. She could rule a planet, yet she could not control her own daughter. "Your Majesty," her advisor said softly, "perhaps we should give the princess some time." "Enough," the queen interrupted. "My daughter is not weak. She will be strong like her father. I will find someone who can teach her discipline." The advisor bowed again, hiding his fear. He knew the queen's anger came not from pride but from pain. That night thunder rolled across the alien sky. Rain like shining crystals hit the palace roofs. The queen walked through the quiet halls toward her daughter's chamber. She stopped outside the door and listened. Inside, she could hear the princess crying. For a long time, the queen stood there, her hand on the door. She wanted to go in, to hold her daughter, to say everything would be fine. But she didn't. She turned away, her crown heavy on her head. "You must be strong," she whispered to herself. "A queen cannot show weakness." In another part of the palace, a group of new workers arrived from different planets. Among them was a tall, tired-looking man wearing simple gray clothes. His name was Mark, a human from Earth. His job was not royal or important, he was just a janitor, hired to clean the lower halls and repair broken lights. Mark looked around the shining palace, amazed by its beauty. He had never seen such a place. Everything glowed and moved as if alive. But he felt small and out of place. The aliens barely looked at him. Humans were considered weak laborers on Xelara, and most aliens believed they were only good for simple work. Still, Mark didn't complain. He needed this job. He needed the credits to care for his little daughter, Ellie, who lived in the workers' quarters. Every night when his work was done, he went to her small room, told her stories, and kissed her goodnight. Ellie was his world, his light after a dark past. One evening, after everyone had gone to rest, Mark was cleaning near the royal garden. It was quiet except for the sound of rain. Then he heard something, a small voice crying. He followed the sound and saw a little alien girl sitting near the fountain. Her long silver hair was wet and her small hands were shaking. Mark froze. He recognized her from the hollow screens. It was the princess herself. She looked lonely, her eyes red from tears. She threw a flower into the fountain and whispered, "I hate this place." Mark's heart hurt. She looked so much like his Ellie when she was sad. He knew he shouldn't speak. Humans were not allowed to talk to royals, but something inside him told him to stay. For the first time, he saw the royal child not as a spoiled princess, but as a lost little girl. He took a slow step forward, still holding his cleaning cloth. The rain fell harder, and the lights around the garden flickered. The princess looked up, surprised to see a human there. "Who are you?" she demanded. Mark hesitated. "Just someone who cleans the floors, Your Highness." She frowned, ready to tell him to leave. But then he said softly, "You must be lonely. The rain feels heavy when you're alone." The princess blinked, her anger fading for a moment. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. In that quiet garden under the silver rain, something began. a small spark that neither of them understood yet. It was the night the human janitor and the alien princess met for the first time. And it was the night everything in the palace started to change. The next morning, the palace of Xelara shimmered under twin suns once more. The rain had washed everything clean and the air smelled fresh. But for Mark, the human janitor, life continued the same way, quiet and unnoticed. He woke up early in his small worker's room deep below the palace. The walls were made of smooth gray metal, cold and dull, nothing like the shining halls above. His daughter Ellie was still asleep, her tiny hand clutching her stuffed toy. Mark smiled softly. Every time he saw her, he found a reason to keep going. He had promised Ellie they would have a better life one day. Since her mother's death on a mining station 3 years ago, he had taken every job he could find. When he heard about an opening on Xelara, he didn't care that humans were looked down upon. He just wanted a stable income, a roof, and safety for his little girl. Mark dressed quietly, careful not to wake Ellie. He tied his boots and looked at the photo of his late wife on the small table. "I'll take care of her," he whispered as he did every morning. The palace corridors were already busy when he started his shift. Alien nobles in fine robes passed by him without even a glance. Some wrinkled their noses when they saw him. Others whispered, "human," as if it was an insult. Mark ignored them. He had learned long ago that respect couldn't be forced. It had to be earned. He mopped the marble floors, polished the crystal walls, and fixed flickering lights. But as he worked, his mind kept drifting back to last night, to the little princess by the fountain. He still couldn't believe he had spoken to her. What if someone had seen them? He could have been fired or even punished. But something in her sad eyes had reached deep into his heart. At midday, he stopped for lunch in the workers' cafeteria. Most workers sat in groups, chatting in alien languages. Mark sat alone, eating a simple sandwich. His friend, a reptilian cleaner named Zek, joined him. "You look tired, human," Zek said, his voice low and raspy. "Late night?" Mark gave a small laugh. "Something like that." Zek tilted his head. "You're not in trouble, are you?" "Not yet," Mark replied, smiling faintly. "But I might be soon." He didn't explain, and Zek didn't ask further. Among palace workers, silence was safer than curiosity. Later that evening, after the last bell of the day, Mark was sent to clean the royal garden again. He tried to focus on his work, sweeping the rainwater and fallen petals. But his heart beat faster when he noticed a small figure sitting by the fountain again. It was her, the princess. This time, she wasn't crying. She was quietly tossing tiny pebbles into the water. When she noticed him, her sharp eyes narrowed. "You again," she said. Mark stopped sweeping. "Yes, Your Highness. Just doing my job." She looked at him for a moment and asked suddenly, "Do you have children?" The question caught him off guard. "Yes," he said softly. "A daughter. She's about your age." The princess tilted her head. "Does she listen to you?" Mark smiled sadly. "Most of the time. But sometimes she's stubborn too." To his surprise, the princess laughed. A small, honest laugh that sounded like a chime. "So even human children are difficult?" "Very," he said, smiling wider. For a moment, they both stood there, silent but calm. The air felt lighter. The princess looked at him again. "You talk differently. Not afraid like the others?" Mark bowed slightly. "I've cleaned a lot of messes in life, Your Highness. Fear doesn't help much." The princess looked down at the water, thoughtful. "Everyone here is scared of me. Even Mother." Mark didn't answer right away. He could see the pain behind her words. "Maybe they're not scared of you," he said gently. "Maybe they're scared of losing you." She didn't understand at first. "Losing me?" "Yes," Mark said quietly. "When people love someone, they're scared of doing something wrong and pushing them away." The princess went silent. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No fancy teacher, no strict nanny, not even her royal mother. She looked up, her eyes softer now. "You're strange, human." "I've been called worse," Mark chuckled. That small sound, a human laugh in the royal garden, echoed under the glowing twin moons. It was the first peaceful sound that place had heard in a long time. But deep inside the palace, unseen eyes were watching. One of the royal guards, assigned to observe the princess, saw the entire scene from behind a pillar. His eyes widened in disbelief. "A human janitor speaking with the royal heir?" he whispered. He quickly activated his communicator. Within minutes, word spread through the palace like fire. The princess was seen talking to a human. By the time Mark returned to his small quarters that night, he didn't know his name was already on a report heading toward the Queen's chamber. He sat beside Ellie's bed, brushing her hair as she slept peacefully. "One day," he whispered, "we'll live somewhere people see us as more than dirt under their boots." Far above, the Queen stood by her window, reading the report with cold eyes. "A human?" she murmured. "My daughter is speaking to a human janitor?" Her voice was calm, but the storm in her heart was just beginning. The next morning, Mark's quiet life would change forever. The next day began like any other in the shining palace of Xelara. Servants hurried through the marble halls carrying trays and flowers. Soldiers stood still at every gate, their armor gleaming under the suns. Everything looked perfect, except for the tension growing behind the Queen's calm face. Queen Xelara had spent the entire night reading the report again and again. It said the same thing. Her daughter, Princess Leraya, had spoken to a human janitor. A human, the thought made her furious. It wasn't hatred, it was fear. The Queen had spent years protecting her daughter from outside influence. Humans were seen as laborers, workers for the Empire. They were not to mix with the royal line, yet something in that report bothered her. The guards wrote that the princess had laughed. Laughed for the first time in months. The Queen's hand trembled slightly. She wanted to understand, but her pride kept her silent. "If this human crosses her path again," she said coldly to her advisor, "remove him from the palace." Down in the lower halls, Mark knew nothing of the trouble that was forming above him. He was busy scrubbing the crystal stairs, humming a soft tune from Earth. Other workers passed by, some giving him pitying looks. They had heard the rumor too. But Mark didn't care about gossip. He only cared about getting through the day and finishing his work before seeing Ellie. Yet deep inside, he felt something different today, like the palace itself was holding its breath. By noon, he was sent once again to clean the royal garden. He tried to focus on his work, sweeping the shining white stones, trimming the glowing plants that lit up under sunlight. But he couldn't help looking toward the fountain where he had seen the little princess before. And there she was. Princess Leraya sat cross-legged on the edge of the fountain, tossing small pebbles into the water. Each pebble made a soft plunk sound that echoed in the quiet garden. Her eyes looked brighter today, but her expression still carried that hint of sadness. Mark hesitated, unsure what to do. Last night's meeting had already caused whispers. He could feel it, but walking away felt wrong. So he approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance. "You again," she said without looking at him. Her voice was sharp but not angry. "Yes, Your Highness," Mark replied, bowing slightly. "Just cleaning the garden." "You humans clean everything," she said in a bored tone. "Floors, windows, fountains. Yet nothing ever stays clean." Mark smiled faintly. "That's true. Dirt always comes back. But maybe that's the point of cleaning, to keep trying even when it never ends." The princess finally looked up at him. "You talk strangely. Not like the others." "I don't know how to talk like the others," he said softly. "I just talk like a father." The word father made her pause. "You're a father?" "Yes, my daughter's name is Ellie." Leraya frowned, pretending she wasn't interested. "And where is she?" "She stays in the workers' quarters," Mark answered. "She likes drawing stars on the wall. Says she'll visit them one day." Something flickered in the princess's eyes. Curiosity. Maybe envy. "I've never seen the stars from outside the palace," she whispered. "Mother says it's too dangerous for me." Mark looked at her gently. "Sometimes the safest place can still feel like a cage." The princess stared at the fountain water, her reflection rippling. "You think I live in a cage?" she asked quietly. "I think you feel trapped," Mark said honestly. "Not by walls, but by loneliness." Her lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but no words came. No one had ever spoken to her this way. Everyone around her either feared her or obeyed her, but this human, this simple janitor, saw through her walls. She picked up a flower petal from the ground and looked at it. "If you tell anyone I cried yesterday," she said softly, "I'll have you thrown out of the palace." Mark smiled gently. "Your secret is safe, Your Highness." A faint smile touched her lips, the smallest one but real. "You're strange," she said again. "So I've been told," Mark replied, still sweeping. "But strange people make life interesting." For the next few minutes they talked quietly. Mark told her small stories about Earth, about rivers, mountains, and human children playing under the rain. She listened, eyes wide, imagining a world so different from her own. But their moment of peace didn't last. From behind the tall silver trees, 2 royal guards appeared, walking fast. One of them, Captain Dravik, bowed deeply. "Your Highness, Her Majesty requests your presence in the throne hall." His sharp eyes turned toward Mark. "And you, human, you are to report to the supervisor immediately." Mark's stomach sank. He bowed to the princess. "It seems I've caused trouble." The princess stood up, her small hands tightening into fists. "He didn't do anything wrong," she said, glaring at the guard. Dravik kept his voice flat. "It is not your concern, princess. Please come along." Mark gave her a calm smile. "It's all right, Your Highness. I'll be fine." As the guards led him away, Laraya's voice echoed through the garden. "Wait, I command you to stop." But the guards ignored her. For the first time, the young princess realized that even her royal words could not always protect the people she cared about. That night, she sat alone in her room, thinking about the human who had made her laugh and dared to speak to her heart. She whispered to herself, "He said cleaning never ends. Maybe he's right. Maybe fixing people doesn't either." And far below the palace, locked in a small storage room, Mark smiled through his exhaustion. He had no idea that the bond he had just formed with a lonely alien princess would soon shake the entire royal court. The next morning, the palace buzzed like a hive. Whispers floated through the halls like drifting smoke. The human janitor had angered the queen. Servants avoided eye contact, guards stood tense, and even the advisors spoke in quiet tones. Everyone knew that Queen Xera's patience had limits. In the royal chamber, the queen sat on her throne, her crown gleaming under the soft light. Before her stood Captain Dravik, kneeling. "Your Majesty," he said, voice trembling. The human was found speaking with the princess again. "We detained him as ordered." The queen's expression was unreadable. Her voice came slow and calm. "And my daughter?" "She was upset, Your Majesty. She demanded his release." Xera's hand tightened on the armrest. "Upset?" The word tasted bitter. "She defied a royal order for a janitor?" The captain bowed lower. "Yes, my queen. She refused to return to her lessons until he was freed." The queen stood, her royal cloak flowing behind her like liquid fire. For a moment she said nothing. Her mind battled between pride and curiosity. The princess had never defended anyone before. Not her tutors, not her guards, not even her own mother. And now a human, a simple worker, had changed that? "Bring the human to me," she ordered. Moments later, the doors opened and Mark was led in by 2 guards. His face was calm, but his eyes showed fatigue. He bowed deeply. "Your Majesty." The queen studied him in silence. He was not what she expected. No armor, no arrogance, no polished charm, just a tired man in worn clothes who carried himself with quiet dignity. "You are the one who speaks to my daughter without permission," she said coldly. "Yes, Your Majesty," Mark replied softly. "I didn't mean to disobey." She spoke first. The queen raised an eyebrow. "And you dared to answer?" "I didn't want to be rude." For a moment there was silence. The guard shifted nervously. Then unexpectedly the queen laughed, a short, cold sound. "You humans never change. Always bold even when weak." Mark looked up, his voice calm. "Maybe because we've had to be, Your Majesty." Her amusement faded. "You think boldness makes you strong?" "No," he said, shaking his head slightly. "But kindness does." That answer caught her off guard. Kindness? No one had spoken that word to her in a long time. The court was full of fear, not warmth. But this man, this human, spoke as if he had nothing to lose. "You will not speak to the princess again," she said finally. "If you do, I'll have you sent off-world. Is that clear?" "Yes, Your Majesty." He bowed again, but as he turned to leave, he added quietly, "Forgive me for saying this, but the princess isn't disobedient, she's lonely." The queen's eyes hardened. "Leave." The guards let him out, but his words echoed in her mind long after he was gone. Lonely, could that truly be it? That night the queen couldn't sleep. She walked through the palace halls, past the portraits of her ancestors. Each one looked proud and powerful, but none smiled. When she reached her daughter's room, she paused. From inside came the soft sound of laughter. Laughter? Her heart skipped. Slowly she opened the door just a little. Inside, she saw her daughter sitting on the floor, folding small pieces of colored paper. Mark sat across from her, showing her how to make shapes, birds, stars, and tiny crowns. The queen's breath caught. The guards hadn't stopped him. The princess had likely sneaked him in again. "Look," the little princess said, holding up a paper bird. "When you press here, its wings flap." Mark chuckled softly. Just like hope. Even when it's made of fragile things, it can still fly. The queen stood silently in the shadows, watching her daughter's face. The angry, tearful child she once knew was gone. For the first time in many months, Xelara looked happy, alive. But the queen's heart twisted. She didn't know whether to be grateful or afraid. Later, in her private chamber, her advisor approached. "Your Majesty, what will you do about the human?" The queen didn't answer right away. She looked out through the glass walls at the city lights. "He has done what no noble, no tutor, no soldier could do," she said quietly. "He made my daughter smile." "Then you will let him stay?" the advisor asked carefully. The queen turned sharply, her expression unreadable. "He stays under my watch. I want every step he takes recorded. Every word he speaks to her will be reported to me." The advisor bowed. "Yes, my queen." When he left, she whispered to herself, "I don't trust him, but I can't ignore him either." Meanwhile, Mark sat on his small bed in the workers' quarters, staring at the folded paper bird the princess had given him before he left. "For luck," she had said. He smiled faintly. "You're changing, kid," he murmured. "And maybe, so am I." Far above, in her chamber, the queen stood by her window again, holding another paper bird she had secretly picked up from her daughter's floor. Her fingers traced its fragile wings, and for the first time in years she wondered if maybe, just maybe, humans were not as weak as she had believed. Days turned into weeks, and something quietly changed inside the great palace of Xelara. The laughter of a child, once rare and distant, began to echo through its marble halls again. Servants paused in surprise when they heard it. Soft, musical laughter coming from the royal garden. Princess Xelara was laughing, and beside her, as always, was the human janitor. Mark now came to the royal garden every afternoon, no longer hiding from guards or fear. The queen had allowed it, though under close watch. He was still officially a worker, but everyone knew the princess listened to him more than she ever had to her tutors. Mark taught her small things: how to make paper birds, how to whistle like the wind, how to plant seeds in the garden soil and wait for them to grow. He never raised his voice, never ordered her around. Instead, he told her stories, stories of Earth, of oceans so wide you couldn't see the end, of trees that changed colors with the seasons, of cities filled with music where people danced under the rain. The princess would listen, eyes wide, completely lost in his words. She had never seen Earth, but in her mind, it became a place of wonder, a planet where people smiled without fear and loved without rank. "Your world sounds so free," she said one day. Sitting beside the fountain, Mark nodded slowly. "It was sometimes, but it also had its pain. Freedom always comes with a price," she frowned. "And what was your price?" He smiled sadly. "Losing someone I loved." The princess fell silent. She didn't ask who, it was written in his eyes. She could see a story of loss there, quiet but deep. That evening, the queen stood behind her tall window again, watching from afar. Her daughter was kneeling in the garden soil, laughing as Mark wiped mud from her hands. The sight stirred something inside the queen, an emotion she hadn't felt in years: jealousy. She envied how easily this human connected with her child. She, the queen of 1,000 worlds, couldn't do what a janitor did so naturally. "Your Majesty," said her advisor, approaching carefully, "the people are talking. They say the princess favors the human more than her own tutors." "I know," Xelara replied quietly. "They say he may be influencing her mind, teaching her strange human ideas." "Kindness is not strange," the queen said sharply. "It's rare." The advisor bowed, but his words had planted a seed of doubt. That night, the queen couldn't sleep again. She kept remembering the human's calm words. Maybe she's lonely. Was that truly all it was? Could loneliness break a child so deeply? The next morning, Mark arrived in the garden as usual, but he noticed something different. The princess seemed quiet, thoughtful. "Something on your mind, Your Highness?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Mother doesn't like you." Mark chuckled softly. "That's understandable. I'm not exactly palace material." "She thinks humans are weak," Xelara said bluntly. "But you're not weak. You talk to her differently." "You talk to me differently. Mark smiled faintly. Maybe because I don't see you as a princess. She looked up sharply. Then what do you see? A kid who needs a friend. Her lips trembled, but she quickly looked away. I don't have friends. Everyone fears me. Well, he said, kneeling beside her, then it's a good thing I'm not afraid of much anymore. She looked at him, and for the first time she reached out her small hand. Then you're my friend, Mark of Earth. He smiled and shook her hand. And you're mine, Princess of Xelara. From that moment something new began. Something deeper than friendship. He became more than just her teacher or companion. He became the person she trusted most. She would run to the garden after her lessons, eager to see him, to tell him what she learned. And he in return told her about Ellie, how she was growing, how she loved to draw stars. One afternoon, the princess brought a small box to the garden. Inside it were paints and brushes. Let's make something for Ellie, she said. Together they painted a picture on a smooth stone, the royal palace under two suns, and two small figures standing hand in hand beside a fountain. On the back the princess wrote, "For Ellie, from your sister and stars." That gift touched Mark deeply. He didn't have words for the kindness she showed, but not everyone felt the same. In the shadows of the courtyard, Captain Dravik watched with cold eyes. The queen must be told, he muttered. This human is no simple worker. He's winning the princess's heart. By evening, rumors had already reached the upper chambers. Courtiers whispered that the human was bewitching the royal heir, teaching her to question her place, even her mother's authority. When the queen heard this, her heart grew heavy. She didn't want to believe it, but her people demanded action. Your Majesty, her advisor said quietly, if you allow this to continue, your daughter may forget her duty. The queen stared out the window again, watching the two figures in the garden. The human laughed, the princess smiled, and for a fleeting moment, they looked like father and daughter. The queen whispered, I won't let anyone steal her heart away from me. Ing. Warmth she once felt turned into cold determination. The bond that had grown so gently between human and alien child was about to face its first true test. The palace of Xelara, once filled with the gentle laughter of a child, grew cold again. The queen's command had spread like frost. Every eye in the palace was now watching the human. Mark could feel it. Wherever he went, whispers followed him. Servants who once greeted him now turned away. Even his friend Zek avoided his gaze. Something was wrong. He tried to ignore it. He focused on his work, sweeping the garden, cleaning the halls. But the warmth that had surrounded him for weeks was gone. The air itself felt heavy, like it was holding a secret. That evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Mark waited in the garden for Princess Lyraya. She always came running after lessons, full of stories and excitement. But tonight she didn't come. Instead, Captain Dravik appeared, flanked by two armored guards. His reptilian eyes gleamed with triumph. Mark of Earth, he said sharply, you are under investigation for theft. Mark froze. Theft? The Queen's sapphire crest, Dravik said coldly. A royal jewel has gone missing, and witnesses claim they saw you near the Treasury Hall. That's impossible, Mark replied firmly. I've never been near the Treasury, Dravik smirked. We'll see. Search his quarters. Within minutes, guards stormed through the workers' corridors. Ellie woke up crying as strangers tore through their small room, scattering clothes and tools. Then came the sound that shattered Mark's heart, the clink of metal as a blue gem rolled across the floor. Dravik picked it up, holding it high. Found in his bag, he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Mark stared in disbelief. That's not mine. Someone planted it. But no one listened. The guards grabbed his arms, pulling him out as Ellie screamed, Daddy! Take care of her! Mark shouted to Zek before the guards dragged him away. He was thrown into a dim, cold cell beneath the palace. The walls glowed faintly, lined with energy restraints. Mark sat quietly, trying to make sense of what had happened. He knew someone wanted him gone, but who would frame a janitor? In the royal chamber above, the Queen listened as Dravik presented the evidence. The gem sparkled in his hand. Your Majesty, he said, bowing deeply, the proof is clear. The human betrayed your kindness. The Queen stared at the gem, silent. It was her late husband's crest, the one she had worn only on state occasions. The thought of someone stealing it made her blood boil, but deep down, something didn't fit. She remembered the man's calm eyes, His gentle tone, his patience with her daughter. Could he really have done this? Before she could decide, the throne room doors burst open. "Mother!" Princess Lyria ran in, her face pale. "It's a lie," she cried. "Mark would never steal anything." "Lyria!" the queen scolded. "You will not speak in the throne hall without permission." "But it's true," the girl shouted, tears filling her eyes. "He taught me about honesty, about helping others. He fixed my bird toy when no one else could. He makes me feel happy again." The queen's heart ached, but she couldn't show it. "Enough," she said firmly. "You are a princess, not a child to play with servants." Lyria shook her head. "He's not just a servant." The hall went silent. Even Dravik's smirk faded for a moment. The queen's voice dropped low. "You will go to your chambers now." Lyria hesitated, her tears spilling over. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. Then she ran out, her small footsteps echoing down the long corridor. That night, the queen couldn't rest. She stood by her window again, the gem glinting on her desk. She replayed her daughter's words over and over. "He taught me about honesty." Meanwhile, in the cell below, Mark sat quietly, staring at a folded paper bird resting on the floor beside him. It was the same one the princess had given him weeks ago. Somehow the guards hadn't taken it away. He unfolded it gently and saw small handwriting inside. "I believe you." His chest tightened. The child believed him, even if no one else did. Hours later, footsteps echoed outside his cell. The door opened with a hiss. To his surprise, the queen herself entered. She stood tall, her cloak trailing behind her like smoke. The guard stepped back, leaving them alone. "Your Majesty," Mark said quietly. The queen stared at him for a long moment. "If I find out you've lied to me, human, there will be no mercy." "I understand," he said simply. She took a deep breath. "Tell me the truth. Did you take it?" Mark met her gaze. "No, Your Majesty. I'd never take what isn't mine." There was no fear in his voice, only quiet honesty. For the first time, the queen saw him clearly, not as a worker, not as a human, but as a man who carried pain and dignity in equal measure. Her heart trembled, she turned sharply. "We'll see what the truth really is." As she left, her eyes caught the small paper bird in his hand. She paused, then walked away in silence. By morning, everything would change. The palace would discover who truly stole the gem, and the truth would shake the queen's trust in her own people. But for now, one thing was certain. The human janitor sat in chains, yet his heart remained free and far above. The princess pressed her face against her window, whispering to the stars, "Please, don't let them hurt my friend." Dawn broke over Xelara with a pale silver light. The palace that once stood proud and bright now felt heavy and silent. The rumor of the human's crime had spread beyond the walls. Nobles whispered in corridors, servants avoided eye contact, and even the royal guards seemed uneasy. But deep inside the queen's chamber, something else stirred. Queen Xelara hadn't slept. She stood before her mirror, holding the sapphire crest in her hand, turning it again and again under the soft light. Something about it bothered her. The pattern of the dust, the faint smell of oil near its edges. It was strange, as if it had been placed rather than found. Her instincts as a ruler screamed one truth. Someone was lying. "Bring Captain Dravik," she ordered. Within minutes, the captain entered and bowed. "Your Majesty? Where was the gem found?" she asked coldly. "In the human's bag, my queen," he said quickly, hidden beneath his tools. "Did you search it yourself?" He hesitated. "No, my subordinates did. But I trust their word." The queen stepped closer, her sharp eyes narrowing. "You trust them more than you trust your queen's judgment?" Dravik swallowed hard. "Of course not, Your Majesty." "Then you will not mind if I have the treasury cameras reviewed," she said. "Every corridor, every door." The captain's throat tightened. "That won't be necessary. The evidence is clear. Do you question my orders?" He dropped to his knees. "No, Your Majesty." But his voice trembled, and that was all she needed. The queen turned sharply. "Guards, bring the security logs, now." Moments later, the truth unraveled. The holographic recording showed Dravik himself entering the treasury the night before the theft, carrying a small pouch. Then another image, him leaving the human's quarters after lights out. The queen's fury burned like a storm. "You dare deceive me?" Dravik fell to the floor, fear in his eyes. "I did it for you, my queen. The court was losing faith. You were allowing a human to influence your daughter. I only wanted to protect the throne." By betraying it? She thundered. By framing an innocent man? Guards seized him instantly. The Queen's voice trembled, not with anger, but shame. You made me doubt my own judgment, and the one man who showed my daughter kindness. Throw him into the dungeon, she said coldly. Dravik shouted as he was dragged away, but no one listened. The Queen stood alone, staring at the gem in her hand. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't in years: guilt. Without delay, she ordered the cell opened. Mark sat quietly when the heavy door creaked open. He looked up, expecting another guard, but instead saw her. The Queen herself stood there, her silver cloak brushing the floor, her expression unreadable. She stepped inside. You were right, she said softly. Mark blinked, unsure what she meant. The man who accused you, he was the thief. He tried to destroy your name to please me. Mark sighed quietly. I don't blame you, Your Majesty. You were trying to protect your daughter. The Queen stared at him for a moment. You speak as though you understand me. I do, he said simply. Parents make mistakes when they're scared of losing their children. Her chest tightened. Those words cut deeper than any insult ever could. I misjudged you, human, she said quietly. And for that, I owe you more than an apology. Mark shook his head. I don't need one. Just let me see her once more before I leave. But the Queen surprised him. You will not leave. He looked up, confused. She needs you, the Queen said. And perhaps I do too. When Mark walked into the royal garden again, Princess Lyria ran to him so fast that the guards didn't even try to stop her. She threw her small arms around him. I knew you didn't do it, she cried, her voice muffled against his chest. Mark knelt, hugging her back. You've got a strong heart, kid. Don't ever let anyone take that from you. The Queen stood nearby, watching them with soft eyes. For the first time, she didn't see a worker kneeling before her. She saw a father who had lost much but still gave love freely. Mark of Earth, she said, her voice clear and formal. From this day forward, you are no longer a janitor. You are the princess's personal guardian and teacher. Gasps rippled through the garden. The human bowed deeply. I will serve her well, Your Majesty. The Queen smiled faintly. I know you will. Weeks later, the palace was alive again. The princess studied with joy, often playing with Ellie, who had been invited to live in the palace. Together, they painted stars on the walls, filling the once silent halls with laughter. Mark often worked beside them, repairing small machines and telling stories of Earth. The Queen sometimes joined them quietly, pretending to check on her daughter, but everyone knew she stayed longer than needed. One evening, as the sun set in gold and violet light, the Queen stood beside Mark by the balcony. Below them the city shimmered. Strange, she said softly. My people once thought humans were weak. Mark smiled. Maybe they were right. But sometimes weakness teaches you how to care. The Queen turned to look at him. And strength teaches you when to listen. They stood in silence for a while. The wind carried laughter from the garden below, the laughter of two children who no longer felt alone. And for the first time in many years, the Queen of Xelara smiled, a real gentle smile. She looked at the human beside her and said quietly, You didn't just heal my daughter, Mark. You reminded me what a heart sounds like when it's still alive. Mark bowed his head slightly, his eyes shining in the sunset. Then I guess we both cleaned more than just floors, Your Majesty. The Queen laughed softly, and for the first time, the palace of Xelara didn't just gleam. It truly felt alive.